That's what happened to the temple. And its fall was the most terrible in history. St. Luke's readers knew that Jesus was right. Some, a very few did, but some may have survived the siege of Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 AD, a siege that was so brutal, in fact, that it made the battle in any war seem like a fun factory. Jesus is still right. For if we went to Jerusalem today, we would not find the temple that Herod built. We would find nothing but a collection of stones and people praying over the destruction of their temple and their modern nation that has never known peace. The temple is no more. What they thought was permanent was temporary. The only thing that didn't seem temporary to those original readers were the arrests and persecution and wars and rumors of wars. Scholars argue that what Jesus said could have applied to any age, but we know that it applies to ours. We know what it's like to have the unthinkable happen. We worry about unpaid bills, the housing market bust, the high unemployment rate, even that Starbucks is not selling as many coffees as it used to. But what Jesus is telling us is that when those things happen, God is calling forth our very best. As one of my favorite preachers, Dr. Fred Anderson of Madison Avenue Press in New York, noted, what Jesus is talking about is not only the stuff of our day-to-day headlines, but signs that we cannot bury our head in the religious sand, nor go into a spiritual retreat, withdrawing from the headlines to let the world go to hell in a handbasket. We are still, says Anderson, God's stewards of life. We are still bearers of the good news. The headlines are not signs of a future day, but signs that it's time for you and me to invest in God's future and follow Jesus more seriously still in the here and now, in this time and place. Hard times are always God times. When the economy is perking along, as it did for 26 years, it's easy to forget God. But then all manner of things happen to remind us that we cannot save ourselves. Only God can. We can tell ourselves that we are saving for a rainy day, but that is, of course, a lie. For when rains come and the floods rise, what saves us is not our money. For often, as anybody who's opened up their pension fund statement knows of late, that's washed away as well. But what saves us is God. Why do you think it was that mainline Christendom was at its peak during the Depression, and that many churches were at their largest during World War II? Why was it, do you think, that on the Sunday after September 11, people who hadn't been in this place for years found their way here? It's because they knew, and still know, that amid all the punditry and proclamations of crown and country, we, the church, have other words to speak. They are words about God's sovereign love and power. The words spoken in this place are not temporary, but eternal. Here in this place, and places like this, we have discovered who loves us the most, and where we are, therefore, the most at home. Every time a child is washed clean in the waters of baptism, and we are sprinkled with the same spiritual baptismal water, we are reminded of God's love that is always ahead of our ability to respond. This is what turns our heads and hearts from what is temporary to what is eternal. Every time we come to the table, we do not do so for some sort of spiritual comfort food, but to receive Christ's body, given for us so that we might bear him to the world. We receive Christ's blood, not only for us, but for the world, that it might be caught up in God's acts of redemption. That's what turns the bricks and mortar of this building, that may be temporary, into what is eternal, an eternal blessing for others. Like it or not, there shall come a day when, like the temple, St. John's and Parkview won't be here. Let's work and pray and hope that that day is a very long way off, and that the place doesn't fall into disrepair because it's vacant, but because of overuse. Then we can all stare at the pile of rubble with a smile and say, boy, we sure got our money's worth out of that. And we used it for God's glory, didn't we? That is what makes the temporary eternal. The promise of Jesus, that while we may be tempted to throw in the towel, turn out the lights and call it a day, it is by our endurance that we will gain our very souls. So we go forward, knowing that what is temporary will not harm us, because we have Jesus with us now until eternity. Amen.